Welcome to KyCPA's Behind the Numbers. I'm your host, Kimberly Lindsay, and in this episode, we will join the women's networking event that Kathleen Gosser discusses how you can achieve happiness. KyCPA's membership director, Heather Hibbs, will now introduce Kathleen.
We are happy to have with us today as our keynote speaker, Kathleen Gosser, PhD. She is currently the director of the Yum Center for Global Franchise Excellence at the University of Louisville's College of Business. So we welcome you today, Kathleen.
Thank you. Well, my friend Christy Burge asked me if I would do this presentation. How can anyone tell Christy no? So I have presented a number of times to her classes. And a little bit about me. So I worked at Yum Brands for 35 years and retired on August 2nd of 2019. And I started at the university full-time on August 1st of 2019. And so who would have known that my beloved brand would now have provided a very large endowment to establish a franchising center at U of L. So it's really kind of like the career dreams are made of. So it's pretty exciting. I also teach in the management department, but particularly franchising courses. And I have to smile to be on line with CPAs because yesterday I was on a small panel with the chair of our accounting department. And he's a relatively new chair and he's a dynamo. And I mean, he's just really exciting and he loves accounting. And he's always talking about how everything in the world comes back to accounting. Everything you do, you've got to have accounting. And we were talking to a potential large donor. And I thought, I think they're all going to sign up for his accounting classes. So even today, as I was thinking through this presentation, it all comes back to accounting. So the work that you all do has a lot of relevance in all of our lives. But I wish you all could meet Michael Wade. He is a force to be reckoned with. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I hope, did I do that too soon before I could? Here we go. I'm going to share the slideshow. So can you all see this?
Yes.
You always have to ask that. It seems like we can never start any presentation without saying, can you hear? Can you see? So today I'm going to talk about something totally different. And it's this happiness piece. And I did this for something like Christy's, one of her classes. And she said, I think that would be a great thing to talk about. So has nothing to do with accounting, not a lot to do about management, but I do provide some facts at the end that I think accountants would be interested in. So today we're going to have a conversation about happiness. So if you think for one moment, just think about when was a time when you were truly your happiest? Just think about that. Now, when that happened, why did it happen? Why would you say you were happiest? Could I get a couple people maybe in the chat to say why you think whatever happened made you so happy? What caused that? See if we can get a couple of chat answers. Around people you love and you weren't worried. Yes, you were with people, you were relaxed and comfortable, extended family. Yep, I thought we'd see a lot of the family messages coming up. So if you think about when you were happy at work, when was a time you were happy at work and why? Oh, I see fulfilling work. There you go. Yep, all the family and friends thing. But doing fulfilling work, enjoying your colleagues and having a work-life balance, which, if anyone can ever figure that one out, that would be great. But it's easy for us to think about a time we were happy in our personal lives. Sometimes it's difficult when it comes to work because there's a reason it's called work, right? But I would submit to you that you could even be happy then. So the work I'm going to share with you comes from a researcher from Indiana University, Dr. Sean Acor. And I'm hoping
7 years old.
Oh, good. It does show. I'm going to show you this video and I'm hoping you have sound. So if I could get just somebody to nod their head with the sound, I'm hoping that this works. Here we go.
7 years old, and my sister was just 5 years old. We were playing on top of the bunk bed. I was 2 years older than my sister at the time. I mean, I'm 2 years older than her now, but at the time that meant she had to do everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to play war. So we were up on top of our bunk beds, and on one side of the bunk bed, I had put out all my G.I. Joe soldiers and weaponry, and on the other side were all my sister's Milos and ponies and ready for a cavalry charge. There are differing accounts of what actually happened that afternoon, but since my sister is not here with us today, let me tell you the true story, which is my sister is a little bit on the clumsy side. Somehow, without any help or push from her older brother at all, suddenly Amy disappeared off of the top of the bunk bed and landed with its crash on the floor. And I nervously peered over the side of the bed to see what had befallen my fallen sister and saw that she had landed painfully on her hands and knees on all fours on the ground. I was nervous because my parents had charged me with making sure that my sister and I played as safely and as quietly as possible. And seeing as how I had accidentally broken Amy's arm just 1 week before, heroically pushing her out of the way of an oncoming imaginary sniper bullet, for which I have yet to be thanked. I was trying as hard as I could. She didn't even see it coming. I was trying as hard as I could to be on my best behavior, and I saw my sister's face as wail of pain and suffering and surprise, threatening to erupt from her mouth and threatening to wake my parents from the long winter's nap for which they had settled. So I did the only thing my little frantic 7-year-old brain could think to do to avert this tragedy. If you have children, you've seen this hundreds of times before. I said, Amy, wait, don't cry, don't cry. Did you see how you landed? No human lands on all fours like that. Amy, I think this means you're a unicorn. Now that was cheating, because there's nothing in the world my sister would want more than not to be Amy, the hurt 5-year-old little sister, but Amy, the special unicorn. Of course, this was an option that was open to her brain at no point in the past. And you could see on my poor, manipulated sister's face conflict, as her little brain attempted to devote resources to feeling the pain and suffering surprise she just experienced, or contemplating her newfound identity as a unicorn. And the latter won out. Instead of crying, instead of ceasing our play, instead of waking my parents with all the negative consequences that would have ensued for me, instead, a smile spread across her face, and she scrambled right back up onto the bunk bed with all the grace of a baby unicorn, with one broken leg. What we stumbled across at this tender age of just 5 and 7, we had no idea at the time, was something that was going to be at the vanguard of a scientific revolution occurring 2 decades later in the way that we look at the human brain. What we had stumbled across is something called positive psychology, which is the reason that I'm here today and the reason that I wake up every morning. When I first started talking about this research outside of academia, out with companies and schools, the very first thing they said to never do is to start your talk with a graph. The very first thing I wanted to do is start my talk with a graph. This graph looks boring, but this graph is the reason that I get excited and wake up every morning. And this graph doesn't even mean anything. It's fake data. What we found is if I got this data back sitting you here in the room, I would be thrilled, because there's very clearly a trend that's going on there, and that means that I can get published, which is all that really matters. The fact that there's one weird red dot that's up above the curve, there's one weird in the room, you know who you are, I saw you earlier. That's no problem. That's no problem, as most of you know, because I can just delete that dot. I can delete that dot because that's clearly a measurement error, and we know that's a measurement error because it's messing up my data. So one of the very first things that we teach people in economics and statistics and business and psychology courses is how, in a statistically valid way, do we eliminate the weirdos? How do we eliminate the outliers so that we can find the line of best fit, which is fantastic if I'm trying to find out how many Advil the average person should be taking, too. But if I'm interested in potential, if I'm interested in your potential, or for happiness or productivity or energy or creativity, what we're doing is we're creating the cult of the average with science. If I ask a question like, how fast can the child learn how to read in a classroom? Scientists change the answer to, how fast does the average child learn how to read in that classroom? And then we tailor the class right towards the average. Now, if you fall below the average on this curve, then psychologists get thrilled, because that means you're either depressed or you have a disorder, or hopefully both. We're hoping for both, because our business model is if you come into a therapy session with one problem, we want to make sure you leave knowing you have 10. So you'll keep coming back over and over again. We'll go back into your childhood if necessary, but eventually what we want to do is to make you normal again. But normal is merely average. And what I posit, and what positive psychology posits, is that if we study what is merely average, we will remain merely average. Then instead of deleting,
I'm going to stop there because I wanted you to hear a little bit from him and where this research came from. And it comes from this brilliant professor at IU. And so he really did a huge amount of study and work on happiness and what makes people happy. And so that's what I'm going to go into. But I think he's worth looking at. You can go and see his full TED Talk. It's fascinating. I could listen to him forever. But I thought you might want to hear a little bit more of what he's done. So he did some research into what are the factors that drive happiness. So when you look at these three, life circumstances, genetics, or your own actions, meaning you can control your own happiness, what do some of you think is the number one? What would you think is the number one here? Your actions? That's what typically people say, you know, if you just really, you can only control yourself if you really start to think about that. Yeah. Darlene, thank you, says my own actions. Lane says the same thing. Yeah, it was funny that video muted that laughter. Yeah, we often think it's our own actions. Why is that? Because that's what we've been told our whole lives, is that you can't change a situation. You can change your reaction to it. You know, you're the one that's in control here. Well, what he found was extremely interesting. And he found that actually what his research says is what makes up the biggest component of your happiness are genetics. 50% of your happiness level is genetics. 40% are your actions, and then 10% are life circumstances. So you've also heard often people say, well, gosh, they grew up in terrible circumstances. Of course, they're not happy. But really, that's a small part of it. The biggest part are genetics, followed by your actions. So when you think about genetics and you think about your parents, I've lost my mother, but my mother was without a doubt the most positive person in the world. I remember her second round of breast cancer, and she had her second mastectomy. And I walked in the room, my sisters, we'd gone off shopping, we came back. And anyway, I went into the room, and she actually was eating one of these Snackwell's cookies. She's sitting up in bed, she's eating these cookies. And I'm like, hey, Mom, how are you doing? She goes, oh, I'm great. Look, they gave me these great cookies. Everything's just, I'm doing well. Everything's great here. And I'm like, did they do the surgery? Because she was so cheerful and so happy. I thought, oh my gosh, how can this be? But I realized from my mom, that was just in her. And so when people say to me, how are you so positive all the time? I always think, you should have met my mom. I mean, if you think I'm positive, you should meet her because she's pretty incredible. So some of it is genetics. And then I think about like my husband, he's not in the room, so I can say this. My mother-in-law was sour. I mean, God rest her soul, she was a sourpuss. And there are times I'll see that and I'll actually call him Margaret, which probably isn't a good marital tip, just so you know, but I'll say, okay, Margaret, but I can see where that happens. And so when you start to think about people in your lives, I bet you can see some of that. But what I like to focus on is I can still control 40%. That's a large chunk. I can still think about that. But I think this is kind of shocking. I personally think this is kind of shocking research. But what he goes on to share is that we have this broken formula in our lives. Like oftentimes we'll say, once this happens, I'll be happy. Once this happens, I'll be happy. Think about people that you know who jump from job to job to job. Once I get this job, I'll be happy. Then they get there and they're like, oh, I'm not so happy here. Well, once I get this job, I'll be happy. Oh, I'm not so happy here. And so if you think about different things, you may say, once I finish this project, this is my favorite. As soon as I lose all this weight, I'll be so much happier. Or if I get a promotion, I'll be happier. But we constantly are striving for excellence, and we're constantly saying, when this happens, I'll be happier. Does that sound familiar to some of you? It's always like, this will make things better. And the funny part is it doesn't, because then there'll be the next thing. I love to ask my students when we're talking about motivation, how long are you motivated by a raise or a bonus? And the standard answer, I'm motivated till I spend it. You get a raise, you absorb it within your next, you get a raise on a paycheck, you've absorbed it into your standard of living, and it no longer makes you happy or as exciting. It's kind of the same thing here. So when you also think about our world that we live in, we have gold, we have silver, we have bronze. Which one really matters in our society? The gold, right? We're all going for gold. We all want to be number one. We all want to say we're going for gold. You don't hear any Olympian say, I'm going for bronze. That's what I want to win this time. But at the end of the day, many of us in our jobs and in our lives, if we hit bronze, we are really doing well. We have huge success. But even this environment that we live in keeps saying success is going to drive your happiness. And when you get to this certain goalpost, you're going to be happier. So when you look at this, the goalpost keeps moving. So you see how she starts and she's like, I hit it. And now I'm just like over it because I'm never going to hit the goalpost. When we keep moving it, all we're going to do is build dissatisfaction. And this really struck with me. I'll show you this again. I love this little thing. I'm happy here, kind of happy. Oh, now they moved that goalpost. Now look what's happened. But if you think about in your own lives, are there goalposts you keep moving that you hit a goal? And it's great to be goal oriented, but then you're like, I'm not really happy yet. I have to do this. Now I have to do this. I have a friend who wanted to be a vice president. So she worked for a company where they put titles before vice presidents, like assistant vice president, associate vice president, senior vice president. And every time I met with her and she was moving up the ladder, she wanted the next one. And I thought, oh my goodness, you're a vice president. I mean, that's pretty, I don't know about you all, but I think that's pretty incredible. So we do have a tendency in our society to think we're not going to be happy until we continue to get to the next. So an important part of this is, how do we flip the formula? So right now, we often believe success is going to drive our happiness. That when I'm successful at whatever that is, when I'm successful, when my kids graduate from college, or when I'm a grandmother, or when I get this promotion, or when I make 6 figures, or when you name it, then we will have that happiness. But if we could flip the formula, what his research tells us is that happiness will drive success. So let me say that again. It's actually when you have found an element of happiness is when you will have the success. And I have found this in my own life. So I started at Yum Brands at an entry-level job back in, I want to date myself, 1984. So I started an entry-level job and they said, you will only be here for a year or 2 years. This is not a career. Well, I moved 10 levels in 10 years. I move fast, especially for a company like that. And when I got to director, I stayed at director level for 20, how many years? Yeah, like 20 years, 22 years, something like that. Crazy number of years I stayed 25 years I stayed as a director. But when I finally was happy being a director, I had my most success ever. My last 6 years were the most successful I had in my entire career. I was able to set my own retirement date. Many times large companies have, they change structures. They have structural issues and people are let go, et cetera. But during those 6 years, I thought, this is going to be the best ever. I set my date 3 years in advance, left on my own terms, and things have been great. But it wasn't until I realized I have to be happy where I'm at, and that'll drive my success. So I have found that this totally works. And you're right. Flip the script, Lane. You're exactly right. And what a difference that can make is to think differently. Now, I'm not suggesting you don't keep looking for the promotion or keep, pushing forward for those kind of things. Please don't misread this, but you got to be happy where you are now. I had a boss who once told me when I was striving up that ladder, he said, look, you got to be happy where you are now and do the very best you can if you want to get to the next level. And he was right about that. And once I quit fighting it is when I had my greatest success. So, oops, I've already done that page. So the reality of greater success, and this is what Sean's research showed, is that when you're successful, you absolutely boost happiness. Your brain works better, and just everything together obviously makes your life work better. Now that sounds so easy to do, doesn't it? Just be happier. I could just tell you, I just got on here and said, just be happier. It's not that easy because you've got genetics fighting against you. 50% of your happiness comes from genetics, and you can't ignore that. So that's something to remember. But I'm going to share with you some statistics because you guys are accountants and you'll probably love this because there is a return on happiness. So what his research also showed was when people are happier at work, that these things happen. Productivity increases. A lot of it, I'll tell you, I think a lot of it is because people stop complaining and they're just doing their work. Now, I will also submit to you, you need to have a good friend at work or two that you can actually let all your grievances out. That helps a lot. From my personal experience, that has just saved me. Statistics, here you go. But to think about, if I could increase productivity 31 to 50%, I'll buy that. If I can increase motivation, especially with today's workforce, that's pretty great too. If I can just decrease my stress, being in a large corporation, being in the jobs you all are in is extremely stressful. I'd love to improve my energy by more than 12, but I'll take that. 40% are more likely to get a promotion because they're displaying that positive outlook and behavior, and they're really feeling that. And then sales increase, which is what we're always looking for, right? More clients, more sales, more student enrollments, more of all of that. So I think that these statistics were so important that Sean provided, but I dug a little deeper, and there's a guy from UC Berkeley who actually has done a lot of other happiness research. He has like a workshop on it. And look at the numbers he found. Less turnover. If we can do anything with that in today's world, but lower healthcare costs because probably stress, as you all know, you're accountants, you know that stress creates absenteeism. Absenteeism creates a lack of profits, a lack of productivity, et cetera. Fewer mistakes and accidents. That's an accounting piece as well, because I'm not going to spend as much on insurance and going to be able to help there. Greater shareholder value. I worked for a public company. That's what it's all about. And then the higher customer loyalty, which drives that shareholder value. So I put the article here as well. But the same types of results are coming out about happiness. So I probably told you a lot about why happiness is important. And I don't really think any of you would disagree with that. But again, you're thinking, but okay, what can I do, right? This is all well and good, but what can I do? So, and I found this to actually work. Sean Aker provides us with 5 tactics that if we take one of them and for 21 days, we agree to do one of them, it will absolutely change your attitude. Now, we had all of our senior leaders at KFC do this. I took them through a workshop, and I'm going to walk you through the 5. They all selected one. They chose a buddy to actually keep them accountable because we kind of need that. And it really does work. And I will often go back to it when I feel myself starting to go down a little bit, because I had no idea, and Christy will be falling out of her chair laughing at this. I had no idea how bureaucratic higher ed was. And that has been, that's been a learning. So there are times I've had to go back to this to kind of ground myself. But let me walk you through these 5 tactics. See, so again, this 21-day challenge, one of these activities of the 5 I'm going to share, and they take 2 to 15 minutes a day, whichever one you choose. It doesn't even take long. So the first one is just writing down every day 3 things you're grateful for. And they have to be new things, and they have to be specific. Now, the funny thing is that the first day you write down, oh, I'm thankful for my kids, my husband. I'm thankful for my friends. I'm thankful for, the things that we think of. By day 3 or 4, those are gone. So then you have to dig deeper. And that's the beauty of the 21 days, because we could all sit down right now and write 5 to 10 things easily, right? But when you have to dig deeper, and there will be days you'll think, what am I thankful for today? I mean, you have to really dig deep. But this one has proven to be very effective. And I've done this one a number of times where I'll start on my 21-day challenge. I have a little journal, and I really like it, because what it does is, as your days progress, you realize I'm going to have to write 3 acts of gratitude. So you start looking for things to be grateful for. So if you're looking for things to be grateful, that changes your outlook. It's so tricky. I mean, like I said, I think this guy's brilliant, because it does work that way. So that's the first one. The second one is what's called the doubler. This one was hard for me. I worked on this one, and it was a hard one. So every day you write about one specific positive experience you had that day. You set your timer for 2 minutes. All right, y'all may think 2 minutes is not long. Try to write something positive for 2 minutes. It's a long time, especially 21 days in a row. But it's kind of great if you think about, again, what's one positive thing that happened? I'm going to write about it for 2 minutes. You're going to start seeking out the positive versus seeking out the negative. So this is the second one. The third one is called the Fun 15. And many of you exercise now. And so some of you that exercise, this may not be as relevant, but I like the way it's called do a fun exercise. So it's not like go out and run like you normally do, or go do a class that you normally do, or lift weights, etc. but what can you do that's fun and brings joy? Yoga may bring joy to some people, but gardening, taking a dog to a dog park, family walk, whatever that is, it's supposedly to be the same effectiveness of an antidepressant. Even if it's walking around, if you have a campus that's really pretty where you work, even walking around that may do the trick. But I do find that when I miss 2 days of exercise, I can miss one. When I miss 2 days, I can actually feel it. So this one's kind of a fun one. Questions so far before I hit the others? Dancing. Oh, Lori, yes. Yes. Those are the kind of things that you can do for sure. And now, gosh, there are so many YouTube videos. There's so much out there that you don't even have to spend any money on. So that's kind of cool. The fourth one, I have never quite been able to do. So do we have any people who can meditate? Any of you do meditation? Oh gosh, even at Yum, they brought in somebody. Now, I wouldn't recommend this. They brought someone into a room of like 50 people and tried to lead a meditation series. It didn't go so well. Just to tell you, because I think it's kind of a personal thing. But there are apps out there. Does anyone have an app they could share in the chat that they've used? There's one I think called Calm. I've heard that's really good. But it'd be nice to share those because people that meditate swear by it. They're able to get such a peace and mindfulness. And I'm so envious of that because I haven't yet figured that out, even though I do know that when I get pretty hyped up, if I take some deep breaths, that works, but I'm just not great at this, but this works. You could do this as well. And then the last one, and this won't surprise you, is you can call them random or conscious acts of kindness. And doing something kind for someone, like sending them a handwritten note that you've done, can make a difference. Some of the other, oh, that's cool, Holly. I'm sorry, I'm reading about this, about the breath. She's saying Apple Watches have a breath feature that pops up and recommend you focus on your breathing for 1 to 2 minutes. That's great. And Spotify has some too. Oh, thank you for that, you two. Thank you. But with the acts of kindness, there are also things you can do. You've heard about people buy their food of the person behind them, buy the coffee, etc. Maybe you take somebody's cart back. COVID's kind of changed some of that kind of thing. But I know that I saw a study where some researchers brought some people in and they said, write a thank you note to someone you wish you had always thanked. So write the note to them right here. So then they write the note and they actually hooked them up to some electrodes to see what was going on. And they found that they were changing. They could actually see the positivity. But then they took it a step further and they said, would you be willing to call that person right now and tell them what's in the note? So the people were skeptical, but they did it. And they showed that, I think it's dopamine, just went crazy when they were able to actually verbally express a thanks they wish they had done and talked about what that person meant to them years ago. And I saw this happen to me last Monday. I had my mentor come in who had mentored me at Yum. And gosh, now he sits on these huge boards and he was president of Kmart, Sears, Potbellies. He flew in to talk to my class. And I think I have never been so happy for so many hours. And it was because of this. I was so grateful and I was able to tell him all the things that he had done for me. So it was pretty amazing. So this is kind of a neat one too. And we have another comment. Oh, Lori uses Calm with earbuds while she's reading to block out the TV noise while my husband is watching. And yeah, and some are free. You're right. Some are free and some there is a subscription as well. But these are the five things he suggests. So I'm going to run through them real quick. Again, either the 3 acts of gratitude, where each day you write 3 things you're grateful for, or the doubler. Each day you spend 2 minutes recording the details of everything that's positive, find exercise for 15 minutes, meditate, or a conscious act of kindness every single day. I did the note of gratitude and did that actually when I had my 30th anniversary at Yum Brands. I did 30 days of writing notes to people who'd made a difference in my career, and it sure makes you feel good. So what happens with this 20-day challenge is you get this ripple effect because you start to put your positivity on others. And then you also, some of you may share what you're doing and others will want to join in. And so then you start to have this positivity that will help you obviously drive this happiness.
Thank you for joining us on KyCPA's Behind the Numbers. And I hope you can take some of Kathleen's suggestions on how you can achieve happiness.